Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. As the quiet night settles in, welcome to a journey of magic and mystery, where the forgotten corners of Hogwarts come alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Imagine a hidden garden tucked away from prying eyes, filled with creatures older than time itself. In this place, every whisper of the wind tells a story, every leaf holds a secret, and the magic is alive, breathing softly in the air. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let yourself be enveloped in the warmth of the night. In this world, nothing is quite as it seems, and every path leads to wonder and danger. Tonight, we'll explore the hidden mysteries of Hogwarts, where even the quietest moments hold the power to change everything. Let your mind wander into this ancient world, where creatures of legend stir and the unknown beckons. Settle in, relax, and allow the magic to take over. This is the story of a garden that should have stayed forgotten, but was awoken by curiosity. A tale of discovery, of creatures bound by ancient magic, and the choices that come when you uncover a power that was never meant to be found. So, let the world outside fade away. Let the calm of the night embrace you, as we step together into a story that will leave you wondering, what if we're never truly alone in the magic we seek? The late afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the Hogwarts grounds, painting long shadows across the lush grass. I had spent most of the day inside, buried under the weight of my transfiguration homework, and now, desperate for fresh air, I wandered through the castle's sprawling gardens. The scent of damp earth and blooming flowers filled my senses as I let my feet carry me wherever they pleased. There was something peaceful about the Hogwarts grounds at this hour, when most students were still inside, finishing their studies or chatting over cups of tea in the common rooms. The gentle rustling of the wind through the trees and the distant hoots of owls settling in for the evening made for a perfect escape from the bustle of the castle halls. I strolled aimlessly, running my fingers along the low hedges that lined the pathway, lost in thought. That was when it happened. My foot snagged against something protruding from the ground, and before I could catch myself, I stumbled forward, landing unceremoniously on my hands and knees. A sharp sting ran through my palms as I scraped them against the rough gravel of the pathway. Muttering under my breath, I pushed myself up and turned to inspect what had caused my fall. It was a thick, gnarled root, far larger than any of the others poking through the ground nearby. It twisted and curled unnaturally, as if it had been forced up from beneath the soil. Frowning, I reached out to touch it. The bark was rough under my fingertips, but there was something else, something strange. It was warm. Not the kind of warmth that came from the afternoon sun, but something deeper, something almost alive. A shiver ran down my spine. I glanced around, suddenly feeling as though I was being watched, but the grounds were as still as ever. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself and turned my attention back to the root. It seemed to lead toward a thick, unkempt bush a few feet away, one that I had never noticed before. Now that I was looking at it closely, there was something peculiar about it. Unlike the other bushes in the garden, which were neatly trimmed by the Hogwarts groundskeeper, this one was wild and overgrown, its branches twisting together in a tangled mass. As I moved closer, I noticed something else. There was a faint shimmer around it, as though the air itself was slightly distorted. My heartbeat quickened. I reached out a tentative hand and pushed aside a few of the branches. The moment my fingers brushed against the leaves, a tingling sensation shot up my arm like a burst of static electricity. Then, as if responding to my touch, the bush began to shift. The branches untangled themselves, parting just enough to reveal a narrow pathway beyond. I hesitated. This was Hogwarts, after all, a place filled with enchantments, hidden doors, and secret passageways. Some led to wondrous discoveries, while others held far more dangerous surprises. But something about this place, this hidden path, called to me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. The air changed instantly. The moment I passed through the opening, the sounds of the outside world faded away. No more rustling leaves, no more distant laughter from students near the Great Hall. It was as though I had stepped into an entirely different world. The pathway was narrow, lined with towering hedges that arched overhead like the ribs of a giant beast. The ground beneath my feet was soft, covered in moss that muffled my footsteps. I walked cautiously, my eyes scanning my surroundings for any sign of danger, but there was only an eerie silence. Then, as I turned a corner, the pathway opened into a clearing, and I felt my breath hitch in my throat. Before me stretched a garden unlike anything I had ever seen. The air shimmered with golden light, though there was no visible source of illumination. Flowers of every imaginable color bloomed in wild abundance, their petals glowing softly as though infused with magic. Vines curled around tall, ancient-looking trees, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. A gentle breeze carried the scent of something sweet and unfamiliar, a fragrance that made my head feel light and dreamlike. At the center of the garden was a fountain, but it was unlike any fountain I had ever seen. The water that flowed from it wasn't clear. It was silver, luminous, as though it had been spun from moonlight itself. It cascaded down into a shallow pool, sending ripples of light dancing across the grass. But it wasn't just the beauty of the garden that left me speechless. It was the creatures. They moved silently, weaving between the trees and flowers as though they belonged here more than anything else in the world. Some were small, their wings iridescent as they fluttered like living gemstones. Others were larger, their fur or feathers glistening under the golden glow. One creature in particular caught my eye, a slender, deer-like being with a coat that shimmered like liquid stardust. It raised its head, meeting my gaze with intelligent, silver eyes, and I felt something stir deep within me. Awe, wonder, and a strange sense of familiarity, as though I had found something I hadn't even realized I had been searching for. I stepped forward, my movements slow and careful, afraid that if I made too much noise, the spell would break and all of this would disappear. The silver-eyed creature tilted its head, watching me curiously. Then, without warning, it took a step closer. My breath caught as it lowered its head, as if offering a greeting. Tentatively, I reached out a hand, my fingertips barely brushing against its shimmering fur. A soft warmth spread through my palm, a feeling of quiet magic, ancient and powerful. And then, a sudden rustling broke the silence. I spun around, my heart pounding. Had someone followed me? Or worse, was this place guarded by something less friendly? The bushes at the edge of the garden trembled. I swallowed hard, my mind racing through possibilities. A teacher? A wild creature? Something else entirely? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to take a cautious step forward, the rustling stopped. The garden fell silent once more. but the sense of being watched didn't fade. I turned back toward the silver-eyed creature, but it was already moving away, slipping into the shadows of the trees as though it had never been there at all. A chill ran down my spine. This place was more than just a hidden garden. It was something old, something powerful. And I had a feeling that whatever secrets it held, I had only just scratched the surface. I stood there for what felt like forever, the silence of the hidden garden wrapping around me like a cloak. My mind buzzed with questions, but my heart was still caught in the wonder of it all. The place felt untouched by time, ancient yet alive in a way that was different from anything I had ever experienced at Hogwarts. It was as though the air itself hummed with quiet magic. The silver-eyed creature had vanished into the trees, and I found myself longing to follow it. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the quiet warning in the way the bushes had rustled, or perhaps it was the way of realizing that I had stumbled upon something that maybe wasn't meant to be found. I took a slow breath and looked around again, this time more carefully. The flowers that pulsed with soft light, the twisting vines, the silver stream that flowed without any visible source, all of it felt deliberate, as if it had been placed here with purpose. I stepped forward cautiously, moving toward the fountain at the heart of the garden. Up close, the water was even more mesmerizing. It wasn't just silver, it shifted, like liquid moonlight, constantly in motion yet never spilling over the edges of the carved stone basin. I knelt beside it, reaching out a hesitant hand. The moment my fingers skimmed the surface, a ripple of warmth spread through my skin, like the memory of a gentle embrace. A sharp gasp left my lips as images flickered through my mind, shadows of something old, something powerful. I saw flashes of creatures moving through the garden, their forms half hidden by mist. I saw hands, human hands, tending to the plants, whispering spells that wove through the very roots of this place. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the vision disappeared, leaving me breathless and shaken. I jerked my hand back, staring at the water as if it had just whispered a secret meant only for me. What was this place? Before I could dwell on it further, a soft chime rang through the air, a sound that didn't belong to any clock I knew. It was delicate, like the distant echo of a bell carried on the wind. And with it came the unmistakable feeling of something shifting. I turned my head sharply. The garden was changing. The glow of the flowers grew softer, the golden light dimming ever so slightly, as if the entire place was adjusting to my presence. The whispering leaves seemed to hush, waiting. I took a careful step backward, my instincts finally catching up to my curiosity. Maybe I had spent too much time here. Maybe I had disturbed something I didn't fully understand. But before I could make the decision to leave, a movement caught my eye, this time not from the trees, but from the shadows near the far end of the clearing. Something was watching me. The air felt heavier now, thick with something I couldn't name. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. It could just be another one of the creatures. Nothing had attacked me so far. Nothing had given me a reason to. A low, melodic hum filled the air. I stiffened. The sound wasn't threatening, but it wasn't entirely welcoming either. It was assessing. Slowly, cautiously, I turned toward the source. A figure emerged from the dim light. At first, I thought it was another creature, but as it stepped into the golden glow, I realized it was something else entirely. It was tall, humanoid in shape, but not quite human. Its form shimmered like the silver water in the fountain, its features shifting in and out of focus as though it existed somewhere between this world and another. And its eyes were the same silver as the deer-like creatures. I swallowed hard. It didn't move toward me. It simply stood there, watching, waiting. I opened my mouth, not even sure what I intended to say, but the moment I did, the figure tilted its head slightly, as if curious. Then, in the same way mist dissolves under the morning sun, it began to fade. Wait, I took a step forward, but it was too late. The figure melted into the air, disappearing as though it had never been there at all. The only thing that remained was the hush of the garden, the silver glow of the fountain, and the unmistakable knowledge that I had just witnessed something no one else at Hogwarts had likely ever seen. I exhaled shakily, my mind racing. Was this a guardian of the garden? A spirit? A memory left behind by whoever had created this place? Too many questions. No answers. I glanced at the fountain again. The water was still, as if nothing had happened. As if it hadn't just shown me visions of the past. I needed to leave. Not because I was afraid, but because I had just stepped into a mystery that was far bigger than myself. And if I was going to understand it, if I was going to protect it, I needed help. There was only one person I could think of who might know something about this place. Luna Lovegood. The thought of her brought a strange sense of calm. If there was anyone who would believe me, who would understand this garden's magic, it was Luna. Making up my mind, I took one last look at the glowing flowers, at the twisted vines, at the silent silver fountain. Then, with careful steps, I turned and retraced my path back through the bushes, back through the narrow tunnel of hedges, back toward the world I knew. The moment I stepped through the opening in the thick shrubbery, the garden's hush lifted, replaced by the familiar sounds of Hogwarts, the distant chatter of students, the rustling of trees, the occasional hoot of an owl. It was almost jarring, how normal everything felt outside of that hidden space. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see some sign of the garden behind me, but the bush had already returned to its tangled, impenetrable state. The path was gone, as though it had never existed at all. But I knew better. The garden was real. The creatures, the fountain, the silver-eyed figure, they were real. And now, I carried its secret with me. I glanced down at my palm, half expecting to see some mark left by the fountain's water, but there was nothing. Just the lingering warmth of magic I couldn't explain. Turning toward the castle, I quickened my pace. I needed to find Luna. The halls of Hogwarts were quieter than usual as I made my way toward the Ravenclaw Tower. Most students were either in their common rooms or lingering in the Great Hall, finishing the last bites of dinner. The scent of roasted meat and warm bread still clung faintly to the air, but my mind was far too preoccupied to think about food. I needed to find Luna Lovegood. Of all the people in Hogwarts, Luna was the one who understood things that others didn't. She spoke of creatures no one else believed in, whispered theories that most dismissed as nonsense, and carried an air of quiet certainty that made even the most skeptical listener hesitate before completely disregarding her words. If anyone knew anything about the garden I had found, it would be her. But finding Luna was never easy. She wasn't the kind of person who stayed in one place for long. Sometimes she would be in the library, surrounded by books no one else bothered to read. Other times, she could be found on the astronomy tower, staring at the sky as if the stars whispered secrets just for her. And then, of course, there were the times she simply disappeared, only to reappear hours later with a dreamy smile and a cryptic remark about where she had been. Tonight, however, luck was on my side. As I reached the fourth-floor corridor, I spotted a familiar figure standing by a window, her long, silvery blonde hair catching the light of the torches. She was gazing outside, completely at ease, as if she were watching something beyond the castle walls that no one else could see. I hesitated for a brief moment. Though I was certain she was the right person to talk to, there was always something about Luna that made approaching her feel like stepping into a dream, like I was intruding on a world that operated just slightly out of sync with my own. But I had no time for second guessing. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Luna," I said, my voice quiet but urgent. She turned her head slowly, her large, silvery eyes meeting mine. There was no surprise in them, as if she had been expecting me. "Oh, hello," she said in that soft, airy voice of hers. "You look like you've seen something interesting." I swallowed. "I think I have." Her expression brightened with interest, and she tilted her head slightly, as if encouraging me to continue. I glanced around the corridor, making sure no one else was close enough to hear. Then, lowering my voice, I said, "I found something hidden. A garden. But it's not just any garden, Luna. It's alive in a way that I can't explain. There were creatures there, ones I've never seen before. And there was a fountain with silver water, and I hesitated, my fingers twitching as I remembered the way the strange figure had disappeared before my eyes. And I saw something. Someone. I don't know if it was a spirit or a guardian or something else entirely, but before I could finish, Luna reached out and gently took my wrist, her touch as light as a feather. "You saw the moonstag, didn't you?" I blinked. "The what?" She smiled, her gaze drifting back to the window. "The moonstag. Or at least, that's what I call it. I've never seen one myself, but my mother used to tell me stories. She said there was a hidden place in Hogwarts, one that only revealed itself to those who truly needed to find it. A sanctuary for magical creatures, especially the rare ones, the ones people have forgotten." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "So you've heard of it before?" She nodded, her fingers releasing my wrist as she turned fully to face me. "But most people don't believe it exists. They think it's just another story." A nervous laugh escaped me. "Well, it's not. I was there, Luna. I saw it. And the creatures, they weren't just rare, they were," I struggled to find the right word, "unreal. Some of them didn't even look like they belonged to this world." Luna's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "That makes sense. If the garden is a sanctuary, it would have to protect creatures that don't belong anywhere else." I nodded slowly, my thoughts racing. "But why is it hidden? Why hasn't anyone written about it? If a place like this exists, why aren't there records of it?" Luna tapped a finger against her chin thoughtfully. "Maybe it doesn't want to be found. Some magic is like that. It chooses who gets to see it." The idea sent a shiver down my spine. I thought about how the bushes had parted for me, how the path had revealed itself just when I had been wandering aimlessly. Had the garden chosen me? Luna must have seen the look on my face because she smiled and said, "It's a bit special, isn't it?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "More than special. It's Luna. I think the garden is trying to tell me something. She nodded as if that were the most natural thing in the world. Then we should go back. Her confidence startled me. I had expected her to be curious, yes, but I hadn't expected her to be so certain that we needed to return. What if it doesn't let us in? I asked. What if it was a one-time thing? She shrugged, her expression serene. Then we'll know it wasn't meant to be. But I have a feeling it wants you to come back. I hesitated. You really believe that? Luna's gaze was steady. Of course. I swallowed, my heartbeat quickening. Then let's go. Without another word, we turned and made our way through the corridors, slipping past groups of students heading back to their dormitories. The further we walked, the more I could feel the pull of the garden, as if the memory of it had lodged itself deep in my chest, guiding me back. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I glanced at Luna. The moonlight caught in her hair, giving her an almost ethereal glow. She looked completely at ease, as if this was exactly where she was meant to be. We reached the bush where I had first found the hidden path. It looked just as impenetrable as before, its branches tangled tightly together. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if it really had been a one-time thing? What if the garden had already closed itself off to me? But before I could say anything, Luna stepped forward and placed her hand gently on the leaves. The air shifted. A faint shimmer rippled through the branches, and slowly, just as it had before, they began to part. Luna turned to me, her expression serene. Shall we? I took a deep breath, then stepped through the opening once more. And just like that, we disappeared into the forgotten garden. As I stepped through the opening in the hedge, the air changed around me. The world of Hogwarts, the familiar castle, the distant chatter of students faded into the background, replaced by the quiet hum of the hidden garden. The glow of the golden flowers pulsed gently, welcoming us back as though we had never left. Beside me, Luna stepped forward with the same quiet confidence she always carried, her silvery eyes sweeping over the garden with an almost reverent expression. She inhaled deeply, as if breathing in the very essence of this place, and let out a sigh of pure wonder. It's even more beautiful than I imagined, she whispered. I barely heard her, my attention drawn to the silver fountain once again. It shimmered under the moonlight, its liquid surface as still as glass. I felt a pull toward it, just as I had before, but I hesitated. The last time I touched that water, I had seen something, visions of creatures, of people tending to this place, of something ancient and powerful. Would it happen again? Luna must have sensed my hesitation. She stepped beside me and followed my gaze. You saw something in the water, didn't you? I nodded slowly. It showed me glimpses of the past, I think. People working here, creatures moving through the garden, and something else. I turned to her, my voice lower. A figure. Not human, but not fully a creature either. It was watching me. Luna's expression didn't change, but there was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. Did it feel dangerous? I thought back to the encounter. The silver-eyed figure had been strange, certainly, but not threatening. If anything, it had seemed to be observing me, assessing me. No, I admitted. Just otherworldly. Luna smiled faintly. Then perhaps it's one of the protectors. I frowned. Protectors? She stepped closer to the fountain, peering into its shimmering depths. If this garden is truly a sanctuary, then it must have its own guardians. Beings that ensure only the right people can find it, that the creatures here remain safe. Maybe it was trying to decide if you were meant to be here. I swallowed, a shiver running through me. And if it decided I wasn't? Luna didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out a hand, hovering just above the water's surface. The silver liquid rippled slightly, but nothing else happened. Finally, she said, "You're still here, aren't you?" Her words sent a wave of relief through me, but also a deepened sense of responsibility. If I had been allowed in, if I had been chosen to see this place, then what did that mean? Before I could dwell on it further, a sound drifted through the air, a soft, echoing chime, like the one I had heard before. Luna turned her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. "That's them," she said. I frowned. "Them?" She didn't answer. Instead, she started walking toward the far end of the garden, where the trees grew thick and dark. I hesitated for only a moment before following her. As we moved deeper into the garden, the golden glow of the flowers grew softer, the moonlight filtering through the leaves casting ghostly patterns on the ground. The air felt different here, thicker, charged with something unseen. I could feel the weight of magic pressing around us, as if the very garden was watching. Then, a flicker of movement. I barely had time to react before something stepped out from between the trees. It was the moonstag. The creature moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, its hooves barely making a sound against the soft earth. Its silver eyes met mine, and in that moment, I felt something pass between us, a silent understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that I was once again in its domain. Luna inhaled softly. "It's beautiful," she murmured. The moonstag studied us for a long moment before lowering its head slightly, almost as if in greeting. Then, with a slow and deliberate movement, it turned and began walking deeper into the trees. It wanted us to follow. I exchanged a glance with Luna, and without needing to say a word, we followed. The path that led us down was barely visible, winding between towering trunks and twisted roots. The further we walked, the quieter the world became, until the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves and the soft crunch of our footsteps. Then, suddenly, we emerged into a clearing. I barely had time to take in the surroundings before I realized we were not alone. Scattered throughout the clearing were creatures, dozens of them, some unlike anything I had ever seen before. A pair of shimmering, bird-like beings with translucent wings perched on a low-hanging branch, their bodies pulsing with soft light. A small, fox-like creature with iridescent fur darted between the bushes, its wide eyes gleaming with intelligence. In the center of the clearing, coiled around a moss-covered stone, was a serpent with scales that glowed like the embers of a dying fire. Luna let out a quiet gasp of delight. "I've read about some of these," she whispered. "But others aren't in any book." I barely heard her, my attention caught by a low, rumbling sound from the far side of the clearing. Slowly, from the shadows, something enormous began to move. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its body was sleek and sinuous, like a dragon's, but covered in dark, shimmering fur instead of scales. Its eyes glowed a deep, molten gold, and as it moved, the very air around it seemed to shimmer. The other creatures stilled, watching as it approached. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling very, very small. The moonstag turned its head slightly, as if to reassure me. Then, it took a single step forward and lowered itself onto its knees in a graceful bow. The great beast, whatever it was, stopped in front of the moonstag and studied us for a long, heavy moment. Then, in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, it spoke. "You should not have come here." The words sent a shiver through me, but Luna, ever unshaken, simply tilted her head and said, "Why not?" The beast's golden eyes flicked toward her. "Because this place is not meant for the eyes of wizards." Silence stretched between us. Then, just as I opened my mouth to speak, another voice, sharp, cold, and unmistakable, cut through the night. "Step away from those creatures." I turned sharply, my stomach dropping. Standing at the edge of the clearing, his black robes blending into the shadows, was Professor Snape. His face was unreadable, but his dark eyes burned with something that sent ice down my spine. Whatever this place was, whatever secrets it held, Snape knew about it, and he was not pleased. The moment I saw Professor Snape standing at the edge of the clearing, my heart stopped. His black robes blended into the shadows, his expression unreadable, but there was no mistaking the steel in his dark eyes. He was furious. Luna, however, remained unshaken. She simply tilted her head, as if considering his presence a mere curiosity rather than a threat. The enormous creature that had spoken to us, its golden eyes glowing like molten metal, stared at Snape with the same calm intensity, neither fearful nor aggressive. A strange tension filled the air, thick like the humidity before a storm. The other creatures in the clearing, sensing the shift in energy, grew still. The delicate, glowing birds ceased their quiet humming, and even the embers on the serpent scales dimmed. Snape took a step forward, his boots barely making a sound against the mossy ground. "Step away from those creatures," he repeated, his voice lower this time, more measured. I glanced at Luna, uncertain what to do. My pulse was racing, but she, as always, seemed completely unbothered. "Why?" she asked softly. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you have no idea what you're meddling with." The great beast beside the moonstag finally moved again, shifting its massive body slightly. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, as though the very earth trembled beneath it. "You know of this place, wizard." It was not a question. Snape's gaze flicked toward the creature, his face still unreadable. "Of course I do." A ripple of unease passed through me. There was something in his tone, something deeper than anger. Knowledge. Familiarity. He didn't just know about the garden. He had been here before. Luna, ever fearless, took a step closer to the enormous beast, her gaze thoughtful. "Then why do you want to keep it hidden?" Snape's jaw tightened. "Because the moment people know of this place, it will cease to be a sanctuary." I hesitated, glancing back at the creatures around us. They were watching, waiting, as if they understood this conversation was more important than any single moment. The idea of this garden being discovered by the wrong people sent a chill through me. Hogwarts was a school filled with curious minds, some kind, some reckless, some with far darker intentions. If this place became known, how long before someone tried to claim it? To exploit it? The thought made my stomach twist. Luna, however, remained unshaken. "I think you underestimate the magic of this place, Professor." Snape's eyes flashed with something unreadable. And I think you overestimate the goodness of people, Miss Lovegood. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then, suddenly, the moonstag let out a low, echoing chime, as though sensing the need to interrupt. The sound vibrated through the clearing, calming and grounding. The great beast beside it turned its head slightly, its molten gaze settling back on me. You were chosen, it rumbled. You were brought here for a reason. My mouth went dry. I hesitated. Why? What does this place want from me? Snape turned sharply toward the creature. You will not burden them with your cause, he said, his voice sharper now, almost desperate. The beast regarded him silently. Then it spoke again. You fear what they may learn. Snape's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Luna's eyes flicked between them, something dawning in her expression. You're not just trying to protect this place, she murmured. You're trying to keep something buried. Snape's shoulders stiffened, but still, he didn't speak. My pulse pounded. Luna was right. This was more than secrecy for secrecy's sake. Snape knew something about this garden. Something deeper, something more dangerous than just the knowledge of its existence. The great beast exhaled slowly, and the very ground seemed to hum beneath us. Long ago, this place was known to wizards. Not as a sanctuary, but as a prison. My breath caught. A prison? The beast's eyes glowed brighter, like smoldering embers. There were those who sought power from the creatures here. Beings who did not see them as living souls, but as tools. Weapons. A sick feeling curled in my stomach. Dark wizards. The beast nodded. For centuries, this place was a battleground, fought over by those who wished to claim its magic. Many of us perished. Many were taken. Until, at last, the magic of the garden sealed itself away, hidden from those who sought to corrupt it. I swallowed hard, the weight of history pressing against me. But, if it was hidden, then how do you know about it? I turned to Snape. He stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Because I was meant to forget it. A chill ran through me. Luna, however, didn't seem surprised. But you didn't. Snape's gaze flicked toward her, sharp as a blade. No, I didn't. The clearing felt suffocating now. The weight of unspoken truths, of things buried and forgotten, pressed against my ribs. The beast studied Snape for a long moment. You were once given the choice to walk away. You refused. Snape's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Luna's voice was soft. Because you couldn't. A strange, heavy silence fell over the clearing. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about keeping the garden a secret. It wasn't just about protecting the creatures. Snape had been part of whatever happened here long before I had stumbled upon it. And he had paid a price for knowing. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, finally, Snape turned to me. You will leave this place, he said, his voice quieter now, more final. And you will forget you were ever here. A lump formed in my throat. I don't think I can. His eyes burned into mine. You must. Luna tilted her head slightly, her gaze unreadable. Because you never did? Snape's face hardened. because I know what happens when you don't." The beast exhaled again, a slow and measured sound. "The choice must be theirs, as it was once yours." Snape looked away. For the first time since I had met him, he seemed almost tired. Luna stepped forward slightly. "If this place was meant to be forgotten, why did it call us here?" The beast was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, it said, "Because the world is shifting again." The word sent a chill down my spine. The world is shifting again. Did that mean danger was coming? That this place would be threatened once more? Luna's expression remained thoughtful, but Snape looked grim, as if he had already known the answer long before it was spoken. I glanced at the moonstag, at the glowing creatures watching us with silent wisdom. Whatever this place was, whatever its purpose, it wasn't just a sanctuary. It was something bigger, something tied to the very fabric of magic itself. And somehow, I was part of it now. Snape exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair before muttering, "Fools." Then, looking directly at me, he said, "You set something into motion that you can't begin to understand." And in that moment, I knew. There was no going back. The air in the clearing felt impossibly heavy, as though time itself had thickened around us. The great beast's molten gaze never wavered from me, and I could feel its words, the weight of them, sinking deep into my chest. "You set something into motion that you can't begin to understand," Snape had said, his voice bitter, haunted. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about the garden anymore. It wasn't just about its creatures or its history. This place, its magic, its very existence, had become a turning point, and I was standing at its center, unable to turn back. I glanced at Luna. She stood beside me, her usual calm demeanor unshaken, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of a deeper understanding. She didn't fear the unknown like I did. No, Luna thrived in it. She embraced it with an open heart and an unshakable curiosity that had always set her apart from the others. Snape, however, was a different story. His presence in the clearing had altered something. There was a strange tension now, as if the very fabric of the garden had noticed his arrival. The creatures around us had grown quieter, the air colder, heavier. Even the moonstag, which had once moved with such gentle grace, now seemed poised and watchful, as if it were waiting for something to happen. Snape took another step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. His face was a study of barely contained frustration, but beneath it, I could see something darker, something deeper. Was it guilt? Regret? "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said again, his voice low but firm. "None of you do." Luna tilted her head, her silvery eyes fixed on him. "Perhaps it is you who doesn't understand, Professor." The tension between them thickened, and I could feel the weight of the unspoken words pressing against me. Snape was keeping something from us, something vital, and I was certain that whatever it was tied to the very essence of this place. The garden, the creatures, and perhaps even the mysterious force that had been guiding me all along. For a moment, neither Snape nor Luna spoke. The silence was palpable, almost suffocating. But it was the great beast, the one whose very presence made the ground hum with magic, that broke it. "You speak of things you do not understand, Severus Snape," it said, its voice like the rumble of distant thunder. Snape's eyes flicked to the creature, his expression hardening. I know enough, he muttered, his voice dripping with venom. Luna, ever perceptive, stepped forward and placed a hand on my arm. The professor is hiding something, isn't he? I glanced at her, surprised by the directness of her words. What do you mean? She didn't take her eyes off Snape. You don't protect something so fiercely unless you're hiding something. You don't fight so hard to keep something hidden unless you know the consequences of it being found. I felt a shiver run down my spine. She was right. Snape wasn't just trying to protect the creatures here, he was hiding something from us. Something that could be dangerous, something tied to the garden's very magic. The beast's golden eyes flicked to Luna, then to me. He is not wrong, but he is not fully right either, it said, its voice slow and deliberate. The garden must remain hidden. The magic here is not for the weak-hearted or the power-hungry. But even those who seek to protect it may not understand the consequences of what they've done. Luna's gaze flickered between the beast and Snape, her brow furrowing slightly. What are you trying to tell us? She asked softly. The creature shifted, its massive body moving with an eerie fluidity. There is a reason the garden was sealed away, a reason it was hidden from the world. Its voice grew more somber, more grave. Many centuries ago, wizards of great power sought to harness the creature's magic. They believed they could control it, use it for their own ends. But they were wrong. The magic here is not something to be controlled. It is something to be revered. I felt a cold chill settle on my bones. The garden, the creatures, it was all tied to something ancient, something beyond the realm of normal magic. Something older than even Hogwarts itself. Snape's expression darkened further. The last time this place was exposed to wizards, it nearly destroyed everything. The words hung in the air, a heavy weight pressing down on us. I could feel Luna's gaze on me, but I couldn't look at her just yet. My mind was racing, my thoughts jumbled. Destroyed? What had happened here? What had Snape been a part of? Luna was the one who broke the silence. What happened? Why was the garden sealed away? Snape's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, but the answer that came was cold, detached. It was not just wizards who sought to control it. There were others, dark forces, ancient forces. And when those forces were unleashed, the damage was unimaginable. People died. Magic was twisted and corrupted. The garden, in its own way, fought back. And the cost of that resistance, his voice trailed off, and I could hear the bitterness in his words. The cost was the sealing of this place. The garden chose to hide itself, to make itself unreachable. Even now, I am not sure whether it was a blessing or a curse. My mind was spinning. The garden had fought back. The creatures, had they been involved in that fight? Had they been trapped here by the very same forces that had caused the devastation? Luna stepped closer to Snape. What did you do, Professor? She asked, her voice gentle but filled with an edge of something far deeper. What did you do to seal this place? For the first time since his arrival, Snape hesitated. His eyes flicked to the ground, as if searching for the right words. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more resigned. I was part of the last group who sought to prevent the destruction. I didn't ask to be, but I was bound to the task. To stop the forces that sought to corrupt this place, I had to make a choice. A terrible one. I swallowed hard. What choice? Snape's gaze met mine, and I saw something there, something that, for a brief moment, broke through the veil of cold detachment he had worn for so long. To bind myself to the garden, to ensure that it would never be found again. To become its warden, its protector. My heart skipped a beat. You were part of the ceiling? You're tied to this place? Snape didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past me, his eyes focused on something unseen, as if lost in memories. It was the only way, he said softly. The only way to keep the garden safe from those who would misuse its magic. But even I didn't understand the full extent of what I was doing. What it would cost. A shiver ran down my spine. Snape, our strict, cold professor, was bound to this place? To its magic? No wonder he had been so determined to keep us away. He wasn't just protecting the garden from the outside world, he was protecting us from something far worse. Luna's voice broke through my thoughts. But if you were part of the ceiling, then why are you here now? Snape's expression hardened again, the walls coming back up around him. Because I made a mistake, he said simply. And now, it's too late to fix it. The great beast let out a low, almost mournful sound. The magic is awakening again. And you have awoken it, wizard. I felt my heart race. What does that mean? What's happening? The beast turned its head slowly, its golden eyes gleaming with ancient knowledge. It means that the forces sealed within this place are stirring once more. And those who are tied to it will be forced to confront what they have done. The garden will not remain hidden forever. Luna looked at me, her eyes wide, her usual calm demeanor slipping just slightly. We've unleashed something, haven't we? I nodded, a sinking feeling taking root in my chest. We had stumbled upon something far greater than we had ever imagined. And now, there was no turning back. The words of the great beast still echoed in my mind, resonating deep within me as if they were carved into the very air around us. The forces sealed within this place are stirring once more. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had ever known was on the verge of being completely overturned, and that this hidden garden, these magical creatures, and Professor Snape's cryptic warnings were only the beginning. What had we unleashed? What did the garden hold within it? And more importantly, why had we been drawn here? The tension in the clearing seemed to grow with each passing second. The creatures around us stood still, watching with their otherworldly eyes, as if they knew something we didn't, or perhaps something we refused to acknowledge. Even Snape, who had become so rigid with his secrets, seemed to shrink under the weight of the situation. His face was pale, his usual coldness replaced with a kind of exhaustion, as if he had long since given up hope of controlling what was coming. Luna, however, was as calm as ever. She seemed almost detached, but in a way that suggested she already knew more than she let on. It was one of her strange gifts, the ability to see things that others couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to. Her gaze, though, was fixed on Snape with a level of scrutiny that made my stomach twist. What was she thinking? Did she know more about this place than she was telling? And why hadn't she said anything earlier? The great beast exhaled again, its breath a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the air. The magic here has never been meant for the weak-hearted, it said, its voice heavy with ancient sorrow. It was locked away for a reason. And now, the ones who have touched it, those who have disturbed its peace, will pay the price. I couldn't help but shudder. The garden had been sealed for a reason. Professor Snape had been bound to it to keep its secrets hidden, and yet here we were, no longer ignorant of its existence, no longer blind to its power. The question that lingered, unspoken but ever present, was, what would the garden demand in return? Professor, I found myself saying, my voice more steady than I felt, what is it that we've woken up? What exactly did you seal away? Snape's gaze turned to me, dark and unreadable. His lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, he looked almost haunted. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to die on his tongue. He was battling something within himself, something that he had carried with him for a long time. I could see the inner conflict written across his face. He had been a part of this sealing, but it was clear now that it wasn't a simple matter of protecting the creatures or keeping the garden hidden. He had locked away more than just a place. He had locked away something far more dangerous. Luna was the one to break the silence, her voice quiet but filled with an undeniable clarity. The forces within this garden are more than just magic, aren't they, Professor? They are living, breathing things. And their power, it's not something that can be contained forever. Snape's face tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something human in his eyes, regret, perhaps. No, he admitted, his voice low. It was never just about magic. The garden is not only a place, it's a force. A living force. One that was once revered and feared in equal measure. And it was sealed away not just because of what it contained, but because of what it could do if it were unleashed. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. What are you saying? What's inside this place, Professor? What's really at stake here? Snape's gaze flicked toward the beast, and for a moment, it seemed as though the two shared an unspoken understanding. Then, he turned back to face me, his voice a mixture of bitterness and regret. Inside this place is not just magic. It's a part of the very fabric of the world itself. The garden is connected to the oldest and most primal forces of nature. It was built to house beings who are older than the stars themselves. And when it was sealed, it was meant to keep these forces from being used, from being manipulated. But they were used, weren't they? Luna asked quietly, her gaze unwavering. The creatures, the magic, someone, at some point, decided they could control it. Snape's eyes flicked her, sharp and accusatory. Yes, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And in doing so, they nearly destroyed everything. The air felt thicker now, as if the very atmosphere were heavy with the burden of this untold history. I glanced at Luna, her eyes still locked on Snape, then turned back to the beast. It had grown eerily silent, its golden eyes dimming slightly as if contemplating the gravity of what was being said. What happened to them? I asked, my voice barely audible. The ones who tried to control it? They paid the price, Snape said, his words cold but laced with an edge of something darker. The garden doesn't take kindly to those who seek to wield its power. It punishes them. I shivered at the finality of his tone. The garden itself, alive, sentient, had punished those who had dared to exploit it. It was no longer just a place of magic, but a living entity with its own set of rules, its own will. And we had unknowingly walked into its domain, a place where magic wasn't just a tool, but a force of nature to be revered. Luna took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, as though she were preparing herself for something far larger than we could imagine. "So, what happens now?" she asked softly. "What are we supposed to do?" Snape's gaze hardened, and he stepped forward, his voice sharper now. "Now, we do nothing. You will leave this place, and you will forget you ever found it." His eyes locked with mine, an unspoken command hanging between us. It's the only way to ensure that what happened before doesn't happen again. But I couldn't simply walk away. The creature's words, Snape's confession, they had all led me to one undeniable truth. The garden was not just a place to be forgotten. It was a place that held the answers to something far greater than any of us had realized. And though I had been warned, though I had been told to forget, I couldn't do it. Not now. Not after everything that had been revealed. I turned to Luna, who was already looking at me with that faraway expression she often wore when she was deep in thought. I knew what she was thinking, knew that she, too, understood the weight of what was happening. "We can't just leave, can we?" I whispered. She shook her head slowly, her voice barely a murmur. "No, we can't. There's too much at stake." The tension in the air thickened, and for a brief moment I thought Snape might argue, but instead he closed his eyes, as if surrendering to a fate he had long since accepted. "Then you will do so at your own peril," he said, his voice quiet but heavy with finality. "But know this, whatever lies ahead, you will be bound to it. There is no turning back." I stood there, in that strange, magical clearing, with the weight of his words pressing down on me. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in mystery and danger. The garden had been sealed for a reason, and now, by simply stepping inside, we had unleashed something that could not easily be contained. As I looked around at the creatures, their ancient eyes watching us with a knowing calm, I understood that our actions had consequences. The garden's magic wasn't just dormant, it was waking up. And we had been chosen, whether by fate or by force, to play a part in whatever story it had to tell. And so, I knew there would be no turning back. The magic was stirring, the ancient forces were awakening, and whether we were ready or not, we were part of it now. The air felt impossibly still in the clearing, the atmosphere thick with the weight of the moment. There was a quiet, almost reverent silence that seemed to stretch out between us, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. What that something was, I couldn't yet say. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt a sense of inevitability settling in, and understanding that the moment to act had arrived. The great beast, its enormous body stretched across the clearing like a shadow from another world, continued to watch us with its unblinking golden eyes. It was the creature that had guided us to this point, and now I couldn't help but feel that it was waiting for us to make a decision. Whatever lay ahead, it was clear that we were standing at the precipice of something far greater than any of us had realized when we first stumbled upon the hidden garden. Luna was the first to speak, her voice soft but resolute. "We can't just walk away, can we?" she asked, turning her gaze to me. Her eyes, usually so dreamy, now held an intensity that mirrored my own thoughts. I shook my head, my thoughts spinning with everything Snape had told us, everything the beast had warned us about. "No," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "We can't." Snape, who had been standing off to the side, his arms crossed and his face grim, made no move to stop us. Instead, he stood there like a silent observer, his expression betraying no emotion, only that familiar, impenetrable mask of indifference. But I could see the flicker of something darker in his eyes, something I had never seen before. Regret, perhaps? Or fear? Whatever it was buried deep beneath layers of self-control and hardened resolve. The creature rumbled again, a sound that was more felt than heard. Its golden eyes glinted with an ancient knowing, as though it understood something we didn't. "The choice is yours," it said, its voice low and deep, like the earth itself was speaking. "But be warned, the path you choose will not be without its price." Luna took a step closer to the creature, her eyes unwavering. "What do you mean? What price?" The beast's gaze flickered to Snape, who shifted uncomfortably under its gaze. There was something in the way the two regarded each other, something that spoke of a long, complicated history. Snape had said it himself. He had been bound to the garden, a protector of sorts, one who had made a terrible choice long ago. But what was the cost of that choice? And what was it that he had sealed away? The creature's eyes shifted back to us. "The garden holds power beyond your comprehension. Power that was once revered by ancient wizards, power that was corrupted by greed and ambition. It was sealed away to protect the world from its influence." I felt a chill run through me at the creature's words. Power beyond comprehension. What kind of power could be locked away here, hidden from the world for so long? Luna's voice broke through my thoughts. "But it's waking up now, isn't it? This power, it's coming back." The beast's golden eyes darkened. "Yes. The magic of the garden stirs once more, and with it comes a force that cannot be controlled. The garden was sealed, but the barrier is weakening. And those who have touched its magic will be drawn into its awakening." Snape's voice, quiet but laced with warning, cut through the tension. "You do not understand what you are dealing with," he said, his words heavy with the weight of experience. "This is not something you can fight. This is not something that can be tamed." I turned to look at him, my heart pounding. "But what do we do then? If we can't fight it, what can we do?" Snape's gaze flickered to the ground, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost resigned. "You can't stop it. All you can do is bear the consequences of your choices." Luna stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Then we will bear them." The words were simple, but they held a certain weight. Luna was always one to embrace the unknown, to accept the mysteries of the world without fear. But there was something about this situation that felt different. This wasn't just some mysterious creature or enchanted artifact. The garden, the creatures, the magic, it was ancient, primal, and it was now awake, stirring from a centuries-old slumber. Whatever came next, we would be in its path. The great beast lowered its head, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the ground beneath our feet. "The path forward will be treacherous," it warned. "And those who follow it may find that the garden's magic is not kind to those who seek to exploit it." I could feel the weight of its words, the truth of them settling into my bones. This wasn't just about exploring the hidden corners of Hogwarts or studying magical creatures. This was about something far larger, far more ancient, and far more dangerous than we could have ever imagined. And now, with our curiosity having unraveled the garden's secrets, there was no going back. The beast raised its head again, its golden eyes fixed on us. "There is a choice to be made," it said. "But it is not a choice between right and wrong, light and dark. It is a choice between what you are willing to risk and what you are willing to lose. Luna stood in silence for a long moment, her eyes locked with the creature's. Then, without looking away, she spoke. "We're not afraid of what we might lose." The beast's gaze softened, and I felt a strange surge of something, perhaps approval or perhaps resignation. "Very well. You have chosen your path." The ground beneath us seemed to shift, and the air around us thickened with a strange, magnetic energy. The garden was waking up. The magic that had been dormant for centuries was stirring, and it felt as though the very earth itself was alive with it. But then, something shifted. The stillness in the air was broken by a sound, soft at first, but growing louder. It was the sound of something stirring, something ancient, something that had been locked away for too long. The creatures in the garden began to move, their eyes flickering with life as if they, too, were waking from a long, deep slumber. And then, before I could fully grasp what was happening, it all became clear. The garden wasn't just waking up, it was changing. The magic that had once been sealed away, the power that had been kept hidden for so long, was no longer dormant. It was alive. It was conscious. And it was beginning to unfold, revealing its true nature. I looked around at Luna and Snape, but neither of them seemed as shocked as I felt. Luna's expression was thoughtful, as though she had known this would happen all along. Snape, on the other hand, looked as though he had just received confirmation of his worst fears. The ground beneath us trembled, and the very air seemed to hum with energy. And then, in a flash of brilliant light, something shifted. A figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, one that I could only describe as otherworldly. Its form was both familiar and entirely foreign, and as it stepped into the clearing, the very air seemed to warp around it. "Who dares to awaken the garden?" The voice was not one of a creature, but of something much older, much more ancient, something that had existed long before even Hogwarts itself. The figure's eyes locked onto mine, and in that instant, I understood. The garden had not simply been a place of magic, it had been a prison. A prison for something far greater, far more powerful than anything we could comprehend. And now, we had freed it. The price of our curiosity, our desire to uncover the secrets of the garden, was about to be paid in full. The question that remained was simple: could we survive what we had unleashed? But as the figure's eyes glowed with an ancient power, I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back now. The magic of the garden had been awakened, and we had become part of its story. The path forward would be treacherous, but we had already chosen it. And now, there was no turning back. As this story comes to a close, take a moment to let the silence settle around you. Feel the weight of the journey, the mysteries uncovered, and the choices made, lingering softly in your mind. The garden may still be there, hidden away in the depths of Hogwarts, holding its secrets close. But for now, it's time to let go of the unknown, to let your thoughts drift into the calm of the night. Remember, the magic doesn't have to be understood to be felt, and sometimes, the greatest adventures are the ones that lead us to wonder, what if we've only just begun to scratch the surface? Take a deep breath, let the quietness of the world around you ease your mind, and know that the magic of tonight will remain with you, gently guiding you into a peaceful sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with wonder, calm, and the magic that lives in the quiet spaces of your mind.